Welcome to the Remote Control Podcast, where we push the limits of the mind and uncover the hidden history of psychic intelligence. From ancient oracles who challenged kings to Cold War spies buried in secrecy, we dive into remote viewing, anomalous cognition, Project Stargate, missing aircraft, Soviet time mirrors, Mars sessions, and mysteries like Tunguska. This isn't science fiction, but documented files and first-hand accounts from programs that tried to weaponize the mind.
Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine it is 1978. We're at the absolute height of the Cold War.
Tensions are sky high.
And you are the President of the United States. You have all of the most advanced espionage tools in history at your disposal. I mean, we're talking the SR-71 Blackbird, the KH-11 spy satellite.
Things that can supposedly read a license plate from orbit.
Exactly. Technology that can see through atmospheric haze and identify, an object the size of a lunchbox. And yet, all of that power, all that incredible engineering is rendered completely useless.
Utterly useless.
By a thick blanket of leaves in Central Africa. A crucial U.S. surveillance plane has vanished. It's carrying intelligence that could blind American operations across the entire continent.
And your only choice, your only real option in this moment of just extreme geopolitical peril is to turn to this very unconventional program.
Based in California, yeah. Involving subjects that many people in your own military are dismissing as fortune tellers.
Right, not exactly standard operating procedure.
That is the starting point for our deep dives today. We're exploring the classified history of Project Grill Flame, and specifically this 1978 crisis where President Jimmy Carter, the nuclear engineer, had to bet vital U.S. intelligence on coordinates provided by a remote viewer.
Yeah.
So our mission is to understand how this deeply unorthodox method not only got a seat at the table in the Oval Office, but, well, it actually saved the codes that foiled the Soviets.
And what stands out to me right away is just the incredible contrast here. You have the total failure of hard empirical science on one side, and on the other, the success of something that is completely outside the known boundaries of physics. To really get Carter's dilemma, you have to understand the sheer scale of the catastrophe that was unfolding in Zaire.
Okay, so let's start right there. What exactly was on that plane, and why couldn't the most sophisticated systems in the world find it?
So the lost asset was a small twin-engine surveillance aircraft. It wasn't a massive jet, but it was a critical signals intelligence bird.
A spy plane.
A spy plane, exactly. It went down somewhere in what was then Zaire, which is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. And the plane wasn't just, a hunk of metal. It was carrying advanced electronic signals intelligence equipment and, this is the critical part, the encryption codes for U.S. operations throughout Africa.
So the keys to the kingdom, basically.
The stakes were astronomical. If Soviet advisors and intel suggested they were operating nearby, if they found that wreckage first, they would get immediate access to our latest SIGINT tech.
And they'd compromise the entire code system.
The entire system. The CIA director, Stansfield Turner, he told Carter this would effectively blind American intelligence in Africa for 10 years.
A decade.
A full decade. So this wasn't a minor problem. It was an instant, high-level threat to national security.
So the panic in the White House is... it's completely justified.
Yeah.
But I still don't get why the tech failed. We're talking about the KH-11 satellite. That was giving them near real-time pictures, wasn't it?
It was, but this is a classic case of geography just trumping technology. The jungle canopy in Zaire is famously dense. They call it a triple-layer ceiling.
Triple layer, what does that even mean?
Imagine 3 different forests stacked on top of each other. That's how thick it is. The visible light spectrum, which is what the satellites use, it just couldn't penetrate deep enough. It couldn't see anything on the jungle floor.
Okay, so optical is out.
Yeah.
But what about something like radar or infrared? Couldn't the SR-71 Blackbirds flying high and fast spot a heat signature or just a big chunk of metal?
They tried all of it. Turner confirmed they tasked the KH-11s 3 separate times.
3 times?
3 times. They actually rotated its orbital path to get every possible angle. They flew the SR-71s on these high-altitude sweeps, which is great for covering a lot of ground fast, but the heat from the engines dissipated too quickly under that canopy.
It just vanished.
It did. And the jungle floor itself, it's so full of organic matter and moisture. It creates so much background noise and clutter that the analysts just couldn't distinguish a downed plane from 1,000 other natural things. The source material says the jungle simply swallows light and sound and most electronic signals.
So this puts President Carter in an almost impossible bind. I mean, this is a man who is the epitome of a scientifically grounded leader. He's a Naval Academy grad, a trained nuclear engineer.
Right, he deals in physics, data, hard facts, tangible things.
Exactly. And the source actually quotes his frustration. He demands of Turner, "Are you telling me we've lost a plane and our only option is to wait for the Soviets to find it first?"
You can just feel the anger in that question. His entire worldview, his whole reliance on verifiable truth, was just colliding head-on with this intractable life-or-death problem that his own science couldn't solve.
He had no good options left.
None. He was forced to contemplate what was, for him, essentially the anti-science option.
Which brings us to this unlikely savior. A thin manila folder. Turner presents it, and it details this secret program at SRI International. But before we get to what they found, you have to wonder about the credibility. Why is the President of the United States, who's dealing with nuclear arms control, even being shown a program about what he called psychics?
Well, that's the crucial pivot point, right? This wasn't some, back alley operation. This program was run by two physicists, Harold Puthoff and Russell Targ, at a very respected institution, SRI International, in Menlo Park, California.
Okay, so it had some scientific legitimacy.
It did. The initial funding, interestingly enough, it didn't even come from military intelligence. It came from academic research grants, and then later the CIA got interested. They framed their work not as mysticism, but as the rigorous study of information transference outside known channels.
So they were using the language of science.
Exactly. Reproducibility, blind protocols, all to study this really unconventional phenomenon. So Turner wasn't presenting folklore. He was presenting a highly classified special access program that was operating under this veneer of scientific research. And they had their own terminology.
Right, they weren't calling them psychics.
No, absolutely not. They rigorously avoided terms like psychic or clairvoyant because of the stigma. They rebranded the asset as a remote viewer and the technique itself as remote viewing.
It sounds more clinical, more detached.
That was the whole point, to suggest a measured, repeatable process. It minimized the connection to, crystal balls and fortune-telling, and it emphasized the disciplined mental control that was required.
Okay, let's drill down into that process. The source material describes this meticulously controlled setting for the viewing sessions. What did that look like?
Well, the location was designed specifically to minimize external noise, both sensory and electromagnetic.
So no distractions.
Zero. The room was soundproofed, painted this dull institutional gray to stop your eyes from fixating on anything. And crucially, it was shielded from electromagnetic interference. The physicists thought that if this information transfer was real, it was probably a very subtle signal.
Something that could be easily drowned out.
Drowned out by the constant hum of modern electronics, yeah. And the asset herself was fascinating. She was described as this unassuming suburban woman.
Someone you'd never suspect.
Right, someone you'd pass on the street. But inside the program, she was considered a beacon. They said she had a terrifyingly high accuracy rate. The rigor they applied to her session was the key to validating the results to the skeptics later on.
And by rigor, you mean the blind protocol. That's got to be the most important part when you're trying to prove it's not just guesswork.
It's everything.
So how blind was it?
Totally blind. The viewer was not told the mission, not the stakes, not the location, not even that they were looking for a plane. She was just ushered into the soundproof room and given a completely random, non-geographic number sequence.
The target reference.
The target reference, which was 8903 LZ.
And that sequence, 8903LZ, it only existed in the mind of a Pentagon commander, linked to the missing plane.
Yeah.
So the viewer had zero conscious context. How does a person go from a random number to there?
The protocol was all about reducing what they called the mental noise floor, the internal chatter. The viewer just sat, closed her eyes, and breathed. She didn't go into a trance or a seizure or anything dramatic. The idea was to quiet the conscious mind and let the non-local information linked by that TRN just surface as pure sensory data first.
Okay, so what was the first thing she reported? The first sensory data. It must have been completely alien to her environment in California.
It was. Overwhelmingly sensory. She whispered, green, but not, the green of a backyard. She called it overwhelming green, oppressive heat.
Wow.
The source details how she began sketching the impressions, really feeling the environment. She could smell the location. She reported aviation fuel and wet rot.
Aviation fuel, that's the first concrete hit.
That smell of death and machinery was the first real confirmation that the target was, in fact, a downed aircraft. She started sketching the geometry she was perceiving. She said, rigid lines, unnatural lines, man-made geometry in a chaotic field.
So something that doesn't belong in a jungle.
Exactly. She identified structures that were broken and banked hard. Her sketch even included this distinct V shape, which analysts later confirmed was the orientation of the plane's tail fin against the slope.
That's incredibly specific.
In fact,
Look, sensory data is fascinating, but you can't send a recovery team to oppressive heat and wet rot.
yeah.
How did she translate that into precise latitude and longitude?
This is where the whole technique really came together. After that initial sensory download, she focused on translating it into actual geographical markers. But the critical piece of intelligence she gave wasn't just the location, it was the correction of the military's current assumptions.
She actually contradicted what the satellites and spy planes had suggested. That must have gone over well.
It was revolutionary. I mean, she flat out told the military establishment, it's not where you think it is. Their models all suggested a certain area, probably a valley floor. It seemed logical a plane would fall there.
And she corrected them.
She did. She said, you're looking in the valley. It's not in the valley. It's on the slope. She even corrected the hydrology of the area, saying, the water. There's a river, but it's to the west, not the east.
So she was invalidating their maps.
She was telling them their entire search grid was fundamentally flawed. And by correcting those search parameters, she was validating the remote viewing process itself, not just guessing.
But then comes the final step, the actual coordinates.
Yes. She eventually asked for a large-scale grid map of Zaire. The source describes this dramatic moment, her hand hovering, trembling a little, before she just stabs her finger down on a specific grid block and delivers the precise latitude and longitude.
Which brings us back to the Oval Office. You've got these coordinates that came out of a sensory deprivation room in California. The skepticism, especially from the Joint Chiefs, it must have been off the charts.
Hostility is probably a better word. The Joint Chiefs, I mean, these are men who rely on hard military intelligence. They scoffed. They called the coordinates a daydream from a fortune teller.
And what was the biggest red flag for them?
The most damning evidence, in their view, was that the coordinates were 15 miles outside our search grid.
Ooh.
Yeah. It meant that if she was right, every satellite sweep, every SR-71 flight, every single minute of that hugely expensive search effort had been a complete waste of time.
So it wasn't just skepticism about psychics. It was a deep professional humiliation for them if she was right.
Absolutely. And you have to remember, Carter, the scientist, is battling his own internal code. His training told him that information can't travel without a medium. It violated physics. But as president, the clock was ticking, the Soviets were close, and he had, and I'm quoting, no other cards to play. The risk of geopolitical disaster was bigger than the intellectual embarrassment.
That risk assessment must have been agonizing. What was the actual cost of just trying it, following her coordinates versus waiting another day?
Well, the cost of delay was potentially the total loss of the codes and a decade of compromised intelligence. The cost of pursuing her coordinates was minimal. It was a single KH-11 orbit.
A roll of film, basically.
That's how he saw it. He realized the risk was completely disproportionate. So he silenced the skeptical room with this very quiet, very defining order, and the quote just perfectly captures that calculated risk.
Move the satellite. Point the cameras at these coordinates. If she's wrong, we've wasted a roll of film. If she's right, we save the codes.
That was it. The moment of decision. The mission was more important than the method.
And the validation.
Yeah.
It didn't come instantly, right?
No, it came slowly. The Pentagon control room was waiting for the KH-11 images to return, which they did strip by slow strip. The analysts, who were no doubt just as skeptical as the Joint Chiefs, meticulously scanned the specific sector the viewer had pinpointed. And at first, nothing. Just that same unbroken, dense canopy they'd seen a dozen times before.
But then, the find, that one subtle detail that the satellite, now that it was pointed in the right place, could finally see.
It took the sharp eye of a dedicated analyst looking at Sector 4, Quadrant B. They spotted it through what was described as a gap so small it would have been invisible to a high-flying pilot. A glint.
Not green.
Not green. It wasn't the color of the leaf cover. It was the white of painted aluminum. They identified it as a portion of a portside wing.
I can only imagine the silence in that room when they overlaid the satellite image with the coordinates from the viewer.
Utter silence, followed by disbelief. They checked and rechecked the coordinates, and the psychic's numbers matched the location of that glint, the downed plane. To the decimal minute.
To the decimal minute.
It defied logic, it defied physics, it defied every skeptical assumption that had been made in the Oval Office earlier that day. The accuracy wasn't vague, it was mathematically precise.
The recovery mission must have been launched immediately.
It was. A rapid extraction team was inserted by helicopter. They had to rappel down through that triple canopy. They hiked for 3 hours through that thick, oppressive jumble floor, but they found the wreckage exactly where she described it, banked against a slope.
And the codes?
The codes were recovered, intact, and crucially, just in time. The window was closing. The Soviets were maybe only days away from finding the site themselves.
So the ultimate irony is that the scientist who saved the day was the one person who violated all known laws of physics to do it.
Which leads directly to the cover-up, right? The final mission report had to maintain the illusion of technological superiority. The method of discovery was redacted. It was listed simply as special intelligence in the official records. The existence of Project Grill Flame could never be confirmed publicly at the time.
And Carter, having relied on the inexplicable to save vital national security assets, he gave a very clear final order to his CIA director.
He did. Quietly but firmly, he told Turner, "Keep that program funded, Stan, and for God's sake, don't tell the press." The program that violated all his engineering sensibilities was just too useful to dismantle, no matter how embarrassing or inexplicable its success was.
It's just an extraordinary journey. It takes us from the high-tech failure of blackbirds and satellites all the way to the successful deployment of consciousness as an intelligence tool, all to save critical Cold War codes.
And as the source material points out, this isn't just some classified anecdote that leaked out. President Jimmy Carter himself publicly confirmed the story.
When was this?
In 1995, during a speech at Emory University. He verified the stakes, the failure of the technology, and the bizarre solution. He said, and I'm quoting again, "She went into a trance and gave us some latitude and longitude figures. We focused our satellite cameras on that point, and the plane was there."
So what does this entire saga imply for you, the listener, in a world that is just saturated with data and information? We have a historically verified case where information, vital to national security, transferred across continents. And it contradicted every known scientific principle of its time.
It really raises a profound question. If even the most scientifically grounded U.S. president was ultimately forced to rely on data that, by all empirical standards, just shouldn't have existed, what does that suggest about the boundaries of human knowledge and consciousness? Does this story hint that our understanding of how information works is fundamentally incomplete? And that perhaps the most reliable sensor we possess when all the traditional tools fail is the human mind itself operating outside its conventional constraints. It's a challenge to the very definition of intelligence that is certainly worth exploring further.